I'm going to talk to you just for a few minutes about my graphic novel, The Harlem Hellfighters. What's it about? Why is it a graphic novel? And why I put so much of my life, 16 years, into getting it done. Now, I don't know who here knows the story of the Harlem Hellfighters. I'm not going to presume who does know and who doesn't know, because I have always assumed that nobody knew, because my whole life that's what I've been hearing. I first heard about them when I was 11 years old. There was a young man working for my parents, putting himself through college. He was what's called an Anglo-Rhodesian, Englishman who grew up in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. And he said to me as he was studying Marcus Garvey at UCLA, he said, you know, this is how we talk like Stewie Griffin. He said, you know, during the First World War, there was units of African-American soldiers who they were sabotaged by their own government. They were not allowed to fight, so they fought with the French instead, and came back as one of the most, if not the most, decorated unit in the entire United States Army. Well, to me, that was amazing, and I thought, well, everyone should know that, right? And I thought, at 11, clearly that's going to come out. Flash forward to high school. Remember the movie Glory? Great movie, 54th Massachusetts. I thought, okay, great. Harlem Hellfighters is next. Nope. Flash forward another decade to the 90s. I don't know if you guys remember when the first Tuskegee Airmen movie came out, Malcolm Jamal Warner, Cuba Gooding. Great movie. I would say as accurate, if not more accurate than Red Tails. They did that. Danny Glover did the Buffalo Soldiers. I thought, all right, here we go. Nothing. Now, I had just gotten out of film school, which if you don't know what film school is, what you do is you take all the money your parents have earned, and you put it in a pile, and you set it on fire. And then they give you a piece of paper that says you've got an MA from film production. So I thought, all right, I'm going to write a movie script. And it was the 1990s, so I went around and I pitched my movie script, and I wrote it, and I researched. And nobody wanted it because this was the 1990s. And the biggest movie at the time was American Pie. And they thought, well, that's great, you know, black heroes from World War I, but could they do something dirty to an apple pie? And I said, no, this is important, this is history. So nobody wanted it. And when you're young, you want to blame yourself, obviously. You think, well, this is my fault, I'm not doing a good job, that's why they don't want it. And I had one last meeting before I was going to give up, and that meeting was with LeVar Burton. And LeVar Burton read it, and he said, listen, there's a bunch of Hellfighter scripts out there. Yours comes closest to the truth. And let me tell you something. When you are dyslexic, and you've struggled in school your whole life, and Commander Geordie LaForge tells you you've done your homework, you stick with it. So I stuck with it. And then later, flash forward another 10 years, I got into writing comic books, and I thought this is perfect. This is the medium which I can tell it. Because that way I can tell this great visual story, and I don't have to worry about the economics of Hollywood. Because let's be honest, Hollywood is not racist. It is not. But it is extremely greedy. They will make whatever they think can make money. And in the 90s, they couldn't make money. Now, once the Harlem Hellfighters book had come out, or was about to come out, things had changed. Lee Daniels the Butler had come out, 12 Years a Slave had come out, all these movies had made, 42 had come out, and all these movies had made over $100 million. So suddenly Hollywood executives were like, oh my God, black people. We've got to start putting them in movies and making money. So Will Smith optioned the movie rights, and through Sony. So let's see if something happens. This is Hollywood. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Now that's the story of the graphic novel. But the story of the Harlem Hellfighters is a story that everyone needs to know, because it's not just the story of heroes during the Great War. It's the story of America. This is the story of the first war America ever fought to make the world safe for democracy. We hear that all the time. We hear that every politician says, oh, we're going to make the world safe for democracy. That was the first time in 1917. It's the first time a president said Americans fight for ideals. And yet it exposed the hypocrisy of those who don't have those ideals right here. How do we fight a war to make the world safe for democracy when Americans don't have democracy right here. Now, our government knew this. Woodrow Wilson knew this, and he thought, oh boy. If I send these young men of color out to make the world safe for democracy, and they come home, they're going to demand that democracy right here. So they did everything possible to sabotage these men. They gave them poor uniforms and poor training. They did not give them guns. Guns were being given away to white shooting clubs, civilian shooting clubs, to practice their marksmanship in case they joined the army. So these guys had to pretend to be those phony shooting clubs right to the army to get guns donated to them. Then they were sent to train in a place called Spartanburg, South Carolina. 2 weeks after the horrific race riot in Houston, where black soldiers got into it with white cops. 13 black men were hung, and the entire unit were not allowed to fight in the war. That whole unit was disgraced. Why would the American government then send another unit of black men to a place even more racist? Spartanburg, South Carolina, 2 weeks after Houston. And when the mayor of Spartanburg wrote to the New York Times and said, do not send them, there will be trouble. Well, clearly somebody was thinking, if they fight, if any of them fight for any reason, that whole unit's going to get blamed. That whole unit's going to get disgraced, and that whole unit is not going to get to go fight. We all saw 42. We all know the Jackie Robinson story. Americans love that scene where Indiana Jones says to him, I want you to have the courage not to fight back. Well, that's one baseball player. Imagine a whole regiment of young men trained to kill, suddenly being told if somebody comes up and punches you in the face, you can't fight back. That kind of discipline is almost superhuman, and they all did it. Not one of them fought back when they were spit on and beaten and thrown off trolley cars. They didn't fight back because they said, we're not going to mess up our chance to go over there. And they finally got a chance to go over there, but they weren't allowed to march off to war. And anybody who's ever been in the military knows that a soldier's right is to have a parade when you march off to war. Remember that scene in Glory? And they're marching off, and the banners, and there's the skinny version of Frederick Douglass, and there he is. And that's a soldier's right. They weren't allowed that. All the units were put together in something called the Rainbow Division, all the white units. They weren't allowed to march with the Rainbow Division because they were told black is not a color of the rainbow. So then they were sent over in a rickety little tub to France to do manual labor to get France ready for the white troops. And then when they complained, they were given the ultimate insult. They weren't even allowed to fight with the U.S. Army. Now this is important context. General Pershing, the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Army in France, had made a distinct point, because when we joined the war, remember we got into the war late, and the French and the British said, oh yeah, we'll take American replacements in our units. And Pershing said, no, no, no. Americans will fight as an American force, under an American general, under an American flag, ... except for the black guys. So they were then given to the French. Now the French, look, we all know the French love to pretend that they're not racist and they're, superior and, No. What had happened was the French had been in the war for so long, most of the white French boys were dead. So they took anybody. By this point, the French had started using black colonial troops fighting in combat. And the black African troops had fought so magnificently that the French, in their reverse racism, thought, maybe all black people can fight like that. So when they heard, there's more black people coming, we'll put them into fight. And so America's first war hero of the Great War, the first, was a black guy, Henry Johnson. He was shorter than me, a little guy from Albany, New York, a little porter, red cap. Yes, sir, can I take your bags? That's all he had done with his life. And suddenly he found himself in no man's land with 40 giant blonde guys named Gunter attacking him. He fired his rifle, only 3 shots, ran out of bullets, cracked his rifle over a guy's face. He was shot something like 27 times, grenade fragments. Finally, he pulls out a knife and wailed on them and chased them all off. He was given the French Croix de Guerre, their highest honor. And he was also given the American Medal of Honor 100 years later. This happened like last month. He just got the Medal of Honor. That's how different America was. And this whole unit ended up winning the Croix de Guerre. The whole unit. And they stopped the Germans from taking Paris. And they were given the ultimate prize, the respect of their enemies. The French called them the men of bronze, which is a nice compliment, but the Germans, out of terror, out of fear of these men, called them the Harlem Hellfighters. And in fact, they became such celebrities that the U.S. Army actually wrote a memorandum to the French Army. This is true, you can look it up in the Yale Library. The U.S. Army actually wrote a memorandum to the French Army how to treat them like second-class citizens. Because America was starting to get scared that these guys were starting to feel like war heroes, which they were. So they actually gave them an itemized list. Do not shake hands with them. Do not praise them in public. Do not visit with them socially. Do not eat with them. Please keep them away from white women. So all of these things to keep them in their place. And then to make matters worse, they were becoming celebrities because their regimental band brought a little-known music called jazz to France. There was a guy named Jim Reese Europe who was a mega celebrity at the time. Rich, powerful, he walked into any club in Harlem, anywhere in New York, people got up and cheered. And he gave all that up, all of that, to bring American music to France. That would be like Kanye going to Afghanistan. But he did it. And these heroes became so popular that despite all of America's attempts to humiliate them and to sabotage them and to bring them home in shame, they came home as heroes. They came home to a victory parade in which 1 million New Yorkers of all colors came out to greet them. They spent more time in combat than any other unit, 191 days. Any unit, black or white. They never lost a man to capture. They never lost a trench to the enemy. And they became the first unit of any color of any country to reach the Rhine River. If this unit had been white, we'd be on our 4th remake of their movie. If this unit had been white, there'd be a statue of them on every street corner in America. If Henry Johnson, who won the Croix de Guerre, had been white, please, Gary Cooper would have played him. And then in the 50s, James Dean would have played him. And now Matt Damon would have played him. But the worst thing that happened to these men was not their sabotage or their humiliation. The worst thing that happened to them was that they were forgotten by their country. That after the war, the U.S. Army, the U.S. government did everything possible to suppress that memory because they did not want that memory to live on. And that's the worst thing you can do to any soldier of any color, is not to beat them, torture them, jail them, or even kill them. The worst thing you can do to any soldier is forget them. That's why I wanted to write this book. I didn't want them to be forgotten. So that's the Harlem Hellfighters. That's me. That's why I'm here. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.